It's simple from a person like myself that is an electrician, 35 years in the trade. I'm an RCDD. I spent many years working on the contracting side. I spent almost 10 years working for electrical consultant. And this is not top secret. What I want to talk about today is exclusions. When we get engaged into a project, it's typically what happens is you see a client goes to typically an architect first. They get some sort of concepts nailed down, and from there the client reaches out to the consultants. Consultants start working on a package. Every consultant starts working on a package once they have an approved fee, and then that package is developed. It's developed through the process, and then you get to building permit stage. It gets submitted to the city, the jurisdiction, and then from there on, the next stage. Sometimes there's different steps in between for CD stages, and then you're going to ultimately get to a tender stage. And once it gets to a tender stage, the package is usually pretty complete. It has the drawings, the specs, the notes, all the details, the fixture schedule, everything that's there necessary for subcontractors to tender this properly. So it gets tendered, and by this time, these drawings have hundreds, maybe thousands of hours put into it to get to the stage that they are. And along with meetings, along with client involvement, along with, in some cases, the jurisdiction is involved with their technical teams. It can be quite substantial. And then it goes out for tender. Tender comes back, 3, 5, whatever the contractor brings in for prices, and it's typically awarded. And what happens is, it's awarded with exclusions, and these exclusions are never seen, or in a lot of cases never seen, by the consultant side. And I'm not a contract lawyer. I'm just experienced in what I do, and I've seen a lot of things that you start hemorrhaging money right from the very beginning before the job even starts. And this is one of them. This is the exclusions. I see where a client can really get a project closer to the budget number that they believe it should be. I believe that everybody should be looking out for the client, and at the end of the day, build the best project possible. I'm going to bring up a few exclusions that show up on projects. No particular order, just a few that come up. They excluded systems to be running conduit and included only for AC90 or MC cable. And this is a big cost difference. The client doesn't necessarily understand this in a lot of cases. Had it been caught in time by the consultant, they would be able to qualify why conduit and wire is required as opposed to MC or AC90. That's another one. So we've got much more than that. Here's another exclusion. We've got other items. We've got basically structured cabling, free air versus in conduit. Specific projects, it is required to be in conduit. The consultant has detailed it in their specifications. They've detailed it on the drawings. They detailed the size of it on the drawings. Yet what goes on is the subcontractor prices free air only. Free air only is a non-starter on lots of projects, even some residential projects. This can be a battle on some residential projects, especially if they're basically a social housing type project. It can be a problem, and you don't find this out in a lot of cases until tender's been awarded, job starts, and now you're missing it. Here's another exclusion, excluding starters from the mechanical schedule. This is an excellent one, seen all the time. Starters excluded because they're supposed to be covered under mechanical. Well, if there was mechanical coordination with the electrical, you would not be missing these items. You would be including them. Starters and VFDs in a lot of cases need to be covered by the electrical subcontractor, not the mechanical subcontractor. If the drawings are referenced, if there's a question, tender RFI should be developed to describe the issue. Here's another exclusion. The exclusion of heat trace and heat trace connections. Well, that has to be covered by somebody. And what happens is it gets excluded. The electrical subcontractor doesn't carry it, mechanical subcontractor doesn't carry it, or it's carried partially where it's believed that the installation is by the mechanical and the final terminations and connections are by the electrical. Well, the electrical never covered it. The electrical never covered connecting for life safety systems. They never covered the hooking up the control panel and the relays included to tie to the fire alarm system. They've never included for the connections, power connections out in the field for the heat trace. They never included for any of this. Again, had it been reviewed cross mechanical, electrical consultants, you would either have a proper allowance for it or you would have a real price for it included into the package. Here's an exclusion that happens on the subcontractor contract documents and doesn't get caught on the contractor documents. It ends up being a miss and a change order later. Pole bases. Pole bases not being covered by the electrical contractor when they are supplying and installing the poles. They are, in most cases, shown notes on the drawings of how the actual pole bases are built and installed. It becomes an exclusion, and it becomes an exclusion not covered by the contractor. It's a giant miss. I got another exclusion. Here's another one. Pulpit covers, pulpit design for steel fabrication, aluminum fabrication, whatever you're going to be doing. It gets excluded or not even included. Even though it's shown on the drawings, it doesn't get included. And then the contractor doesn't include it as well. There's another major one that comes back later to bite because it's at change order rate later. Here's something that may not come up on a exclusion precisely, but it may be a clarification or a qualification. It's using aluminum conductors versus specified copper conductors. If the drawings specify copper, a lot of times the subcontractor qualifies that they are tendering the project in aluminum. There's a couple ways that exclusions can be dealt with through this whole tender process to ensure coverage and to protect the client. One is through an RFI process. Every one of the exclusions can become an RFI. It can be documented. It can be responded to correctly, and that's a good way for tracking purposes, is because typically contractors now especially like to track everything with some sort of process. So an RFI process at tender stage is a good way of doing it. But it happens day in and day out. You know, you've got also during tender stage, had all these exclusions potentially been RFI'd, you could have dealt with them either, like I said earlier, through the meeting setup or through RFI format, and that might cover it better than it not being covered as well. Another decent way of dealing with the exclusions is to pass them all on to the consultant, have a consultant review, and then have a meeting with each subcontractor. The key with this meeting is it should be done with senior staff that are experienced in the construction side of things. They understand what the subcontractor is talking about, what they're attempting to exclude from the process, and then you can have a real discussion, and you're able to then pass on information clearly to the client who might not be able to understand why there's exclusions or where the coverage should be. A hybrid approach where you have the RFI process as well as the consultant engagement with the contractor and subcontractor is also a really good way of dealing with it. That way you have everything documented ahead of time. Everyone understands where everyone sits, and then it can be a pretty detailed and smooth process through a meeting to resolve or to clarify the exclusions. The subcontractor might have very good reasons why they excluded something. This is why it's a good idea to sit down with them and discuss. There may be valid points. There may be missing items that they can't accurately price. There may be a strict, scheduling issue with getting a tender out, and they're pushed for a number, and then they have to exclude something. But again, throughout a meeting process, this can be discussed, so it's clear to everybody where everyone's number is. We want to make sure that all allowances, that'll be allowances, either device allowances, cash allowances, separate prices, are included either in the subcontractor's price or in the contractor's price. And with that, we want to understand at the tender stage what the qualifications are to this. What in those prices, what did they include for? How did they price it? Did they include for it device allowance for additional devices at a tender rate, and when they're actually needed later in the job to reconcile this, you're running into using change order rates, which is going to cut the value of that down. So we have to understand what's being carried at an early stage, and this is another good time to resolve that and sit down and hash it out. And maybe some of this has to be passed on to different cash allowances that the contractor needs to carry. What we don't want to see big ticket exclusions that have no coverage anywhere. This is where you run into trouble. You run into trouble because if the consultant's not engaged in this process, first of all, they don't understand what's really been excluded or not. They'll find out later when they find out, in a lot of cases by accident, what's been excluded. But the consultant has prepared these drawings and put in a lot of time and effort, and they believe everything in this package, from the references to the codes, to the references to the other drawings, to the references to notes on the drawings, to specifications, to technical detail references, to all these are covered by the subcontractor in their price. And if they're simply excluded, there is going to be big holes in the quotation, and this will be costly later, guaranteed. We want everything done at the end of the day, and if there's missing pieces, for example, if we're missing on the electrical side all the motor connections, that's a big cost later on the job, especially on a large project. If we're missing, if the electrical subcontractor has excluded the specifications or the sequence of operation or the mechanical drawings, notes, details, specs, there could be big items missed from the electrical package if all they're doing is counting devices on a plan. These are just a few examples. There's many more, and it requires a full detailed review to sort through every one of them. During this process as well, the subcontractor needs to be transparent onto why the prices are what they are, why the exclusions are there, why the qualifications are there. We need to know as consultants, prior to getting to a stage of a shop drawing review, why they tendered an alternate product for a lighting package. this should be clear and on the table right from the beginning. There may have been a valid discussion with the client. There may have been something discussed that you know, they were requested to go after something as a cost savings, and but everyone needs to be in the loop so it's understood, and those items can be picked up, and the final record set of drawings can be adjusted to suit. As part of the contractor due diligence on accepting the quotations from the subcontractors, part of their process needs to be the step of going through the consultants, or even a third-party consultant if they don't want to engage the specific consultant of record on the project. Somebody that can go through and do a detailed review to ensure that there's adequate coverage. This is the only way that the client is going to understand the true value of the project, either through the RFI process or through the, you know, combo hybrid approach with the RFI process and the meeting, or just the meeting. It's a good way at a high level to get a good understanding where everything is, you know. But what we do as well is this: I try to understand exactly what's included in the drawing, specs, details, notes, and then try to cross that over to the exclusions to really get a grasp on why something's been left out, and where it should land. The consultants have like I said earlier, probably a couple times already, the consultants have put a lot of hours into this. They've put their head into it. They've had lots of meetings. They've coordinated and re-coordinated and made changes all the way. They've done their due diligence to provide the best package possible with the design intent. So there's no reason why, you know, simple items like with the items I discussed should be excluded or clarified out of the project. They should be included. In a lot of cases, the consultant doesn't have it in their fee to deal with these heavy-duty reviews, especially on a large project. So this may be an additional cost to the consultant, but it's something that should be looked at seriously. As professionals, we need to look at making sure everything is included. We need to ensure that the electrical package is complete, or any package for that matter is complete. We need to ensure that the quotations are complete. And prior to getting to a construction stage, nothing at this stage is going to be a big problem to fix. It's later where it's going to be a big problem.